Hello, and welcome to the Table and Well podcast. I'm Tennison.
And I'm Ginelle. Thank you for joining us as we discuss topics and give practical tools that help you live, grow, and be in healthy, joy-filled relationship with God, yourself, and others.
For more information and resources, or if you're looking for coaching, connection, and community, please visit tableandwellco.com. We hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello, guys, and thank you for joining us today for episode 4 of season 3 of the Table and Well podcast. Again, we are excited to be here with you guys, and today we're going to start our revisit of the maturity series that we put out. We cannot wait to dig into this and bring this to you. And so just wanted to give you a quick kind of some reasoning as to why we're doing this. Yeah. Why are we revisiting this? Why are we bringing this to you again? First of all, guys, just want to help you identify where you might have gaps in your maturity.
I don't have gaps in my maturity.
None of us do.
None of us do.
None of us. No, not at all. None of us. No. Yeah. So we want to help you identify those. And
well, you do. I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, here we are.
Everybody
guys.
else says I don't.
Okay. Here we are. Here we are. I love it. Yes. You don't, my dear, have any.
You're right.
Okay. But we want to help you.
Right, yeah, we want to help everybody else
identify their gaps.
Because we've arrived.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, and if you believe that,
right.
I've
Please
got
don't
some
follow
land
us.
that you can buy.
Right.
Anyway, but no, just so because again, our heart and our goal and our mission again is to develop powerful people, communities, families, and teams, so that we can be the healthy family of God that we need and not the world needs. And in order to do that, we have to be fully mature. Let me rephrase that. To do that, we need to be growing towards maturity.
Yes.
And if
growing
we don't,
in maturity, really. There's not even a towards right. In so many ways.
That's right. So in order to do that, we need to know where our gaps are. So we know how to address them and to fill them. We want to give you some practical things that you can do to grow your maturity. We also want to give you some practical things you can do for others because you are someone else's community.
Right. And
so we want to give you some tools as well that you can begin to do and use in your community, your family, your teams, to help them also grow in their maturity. And again, guys, when we first did this podcast, again, it was almost 5 years ago now. And we have changed and grown a lot, and we have a lot more a lot more experiences, and a lot more insight really on these things that we really want to share with you.
Yeah. And really, before we start this infant stage, I just want to give a bit of a trigger warning, simply because we're going to be talking about what it was like for you to have an experience as an infant. And often our gaps are coming because we didn't experience everything that we needed. Mm-hmm. And so as you listen to some of the things that we might talk about today and in the next podcast and the podcast to come, you may end up experiencing some sadness around the loss of what you didn't get and what you actually really needed, and maybe even what you still need today. And we just want to be real about that.
Yep.
And there could be a number of reasons why that is true for you. But we want to acknowledge that may come up and just to make you aware. And if it does, just welcome that sadness being there. It's totally appropriate. You might even feel angry that you didn't get a better start in life, or that you got a raw deal out of,
right.
And some of the stuff isn't even necessarily that you don't know that might be true for you, but you may get triggered into feeling those feelings again. You might feel shame. A lot of us, as we're learning about these maturity gaps, there's this realization of, gosh, I should have known this. I should have, should. And for some reason or another, you didn't. And often it's because who knew? Who knew?
We didn't know.
We learned this in our 40s.
Yep.
And there was some wrestling with sadness and anger and shame.
Shame was mine. That was the big thing for me. It was this I should know this. I should have known that. I should have done this. And that was the big one that I had to wrestle through and navigate through. So it's a real thing.
Yeah, because now there's language around, I knew I wanted to do that. I knew that felt true to do that. but I didn't know how to do that. But now I really actually know that some of those thoughts, feelings that I had are real.
Yes.
And that they're appropriate for me as an adult or as a parent to have the skill. I kind of known I didn't have the skill, didn't have a name for that. And now I really have to come face to face with the fact that I don't have the skill.
Yes.
And so that can create some shame. And we want to beat ourselves up and judge ourselves even for that. But we're just going to encourage you that as you hear this, be really tender with yourself. A lot of us don't know what we don't know. Right?
Exactly.
Like that's part of why we do what we do, is that lo and behold, there's maturity skills that we could have and quote unquote should have learned.
Exactly.
And now here we are as in the middle of life, not having had those and having raised children and created some pain and some tough situations out of the fact we didn't know these things. And so we just want to encourage you to be tender with yourself. This is an invitation to begin learning, to begin the journey of healing, to begin the journey of growing and maturing and discovering even what could be and what is possible and the steps that it might take to be able to grow in those areas.
And one other thing I want to say in that space too is there may even be anger with, or judgment for the people in your life, whether they're your caregivers, that when you grew up, like, why didn't you teach me these skills? I should have learned these. Like, I wouldn't be in this space now. But at the same time, there could be some judgment and anger and shame towards yourself because of maybe you don't have the relationship that you really wanted with your adult kids now, if you're in that stage of life. And you can look back and say, oh, I see how this turned into this. And so,
or maybe a marriage or relationship that ended.
Anything. Yeah. And so, again, just reiterating, give yourself grace, be tender towards yourself.
And give others grace.
Yes.
We're going to read off some lists of things that are appropriate for infant maturity and tasks that you should have completed and things that your community should have done for you. And people are going people are going to come to mind. And you're going to see gaps in their life as well. And this is not about labeling people, categorizing people, judging people, including you.
Yes.
But you may feel this desire to criticize or desire to judge. And that is not our goal here either. Yeah. It's okay to feel angry or frustrated. It's totally appropriate, disappointed even. But this is not a tool to beat one another with. It really is meant to be an invitation or a clarification around.
Yeah.
Okay, that person has some maturity gaps. I needed them to be something different in my life, whether that's a leader, maybe even that's currently in your life. And they just don't have what's needed to be able to be that for me.
Yeah.
And just to grow in a space of like, okay, now I understand why this wasn't working.
Yeah.
And how do I move forward through that?
Yeah. I think too, this isn't in our notes, but I was just thinking, it's also an opportunity for you to own your story. And because if you can't own your story, then you really you're not operating in reality. Right. Therefore, you can't really effectively attack or change those things. Yeah. And so, again, it's not to beat up. It's not to criticize. It's not to condemn. It's not to cast shame. But it is to just say, no, this is the reality of where I am. This is what happened. And I did the best with what I knew to do. My parents did the best, or my caregivers did what they knew to do. And so here we are.
Right.
And so now we know, and now we can move forward.
Right. And I think it would be really healthy if you could maybe look at this like the acknowledgement of an injury or the acknowledgement of maybe something that's not healthy in your body. When we find out that we have a sprained ankle, we don't beat ourselves up for that. Maybe we did something goofy to get that sprained ankle, right? But like that's not a reflection of who we actually are, or who someone else is, any more than any other diagnosis is. And so remember that in this space. What it does is identify the problem. It identifies places that there's work to do or healing to do. And that's our invitation to you is
Yeah.
We're here to partner with you to help identify places that you can grow and that you can invite others to grow alongside of you, and to bring this conversation back.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Back to the family. The reality is, we all know we are not who we want to be.
No.
And we are not functioning healthy. And we all know that nobody else is either. Let's stop pretending that anything else is true. But what we are saying is it doesn't have to stay that way.
Yeah.
But the shift is also not like, oh, well, I learned something new through this podcast and now tomorrow is different. There's a lot of work.
A lot of work to do between now and then.
Just like any other injury. Okay, I have a sprained ankle. To get back to being able to run on that ankle, it's going to take some work and pain.
Yeah.
And that's true here too. So grace along your journey.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
All right. Good intro. Here we go. Let's do this. So we're going to jump in. So stage one. Infant. So again, infant is ages 0 to 3. And the primary goal is to learn how to receive and how to live in joy. Mm-hmm. And again, that joy meaning the deep knowing through relational experience that someone is glad to be with you no matter what. And so learning how to live in that space, live from joy, live in joy, knowing that you have value just because you are, has nothing to do with what you can do. And learning how to receive, which is a big one. I know we're going to maybe dig a little deeper into that when we go, but learning to receive is actually a really, really big skill.
Yes.
That we need to have. So let's talk through some of the infant stage needs. And so again, needs being the things that we need our community to do for us so we can be fully mature as an infant.
Right, because there's two sides to maturity. In case you didn't listen to the previous podcast, there's two sides. There's the needs that you have, which come from outside of you, from your community, from your caregiver, from the people you're doing life with. And then there's tasks, which is your part to do that no one else can do for you.
Yep.
And we said this in the last podcast, and I just want to sneak it in here a little bit. The reality is many of us are missing the healthy community we need to walk with us.
Yes.
Re-walk with us through this infant stage. So I think we should come back to that toward the end of this, but I just want to say that as you're
That's
hearing.
Good.
So infant stage needs from their community or care, and really from their caregivers, because this should have happened in infancy. Yeah.
So if any of you have been around a baby, know a baby, seen a baby, you know that babies, infants, they don't know what they need. They don't know how to ask for it. They don't have the resources to get it. They have they can't.
They can't do anything.
They can't do anything. They can roll over and maybe, Well,
yeah.
Anyway, I won't go into all that. But the community, their caregivers, their parents have to they have to work to figure out what they need.
Right.
And then give it to them.
Right.
So that so we need our community as infants. Infants need their community to figure out what they need and to give it to them. So important needs are met without asking.
Right.
And that's the big key, is being able to receive, again, is that receiving.
Right. Or being given
to without having to ask for it. Physically, emotionally, mentally, all of those things. Those are needs. They need others to synchronize or attune with them first. So they need to know that when they feel tired or they feel scared, that they're being attuned to.
Right.
To know that their needs matter and that they're able, and so that they know they're not alone. Again, it's that joy
not
space.
Alone space. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, because joy also, we didn't really talk about this yet, but joy also doesn't look like we're happy all the time and I'm glad to be with you no matter what, as if it's like, oh, that feeling doesn't exist, we're moving on, we're just happy now. Joy can look like crying with someone.
Yes.
Or feeling sad or even scared with someone. All of that is possible. It is that gladness. I'm not leaving you in this moment.
Right. Yes.
I'm not trying to force you to leave yourself in this moment and those very real feelings that you're having.
Yeah.
And this is super challenging for a 2-year-old when you have a 2-year-old in the home. That like learning how to, and this is where a lot of us have missed this from our caregivers, because again, soup brain at about 2, where all these feelings show up and they're big and they're unreasonable. I actually saw something on social media today about about this like toddler, and they wake up and they are the joy of everybody's life, and everybody's so excited they're awake and breakfast is ready and we just can't wait to see you. And and it's like this video of this little girl laying on the ground rubbing her eyes and like throwing a fit, and she's just angry for no real reason when everybody's just glad to see her, and she's like unreasonably upset over nothing, and those like and so how do we show up well and not disregard even the littles at that stage who need to know, like, hey, I'm with you right here, right now, even though this is the most unreasonable thing ever.
Yes.
Because then we just continue to perpetuate that when that's not happening, or we begin to get this message of my feelings cause other people not to be want to be with me, or my feelings
don't matter, or
aren't real, or even though they feel so real on the inside, nobody else seems to think that they exist, and that can create just a lot of conflict.
Yeah, and you can see that, and those are some of the things that you can actually see in adults that didn't get this need met, was that they believe that their feelings don't matter, that they don't matter, all of those, and so that's
Yep. And it often creates this space where they can't synchronize with their own feelings either, because nobody else has done that. I hate to go back.
Go back.
But the important needs are met without asking.
Yeah.
The second half of this podcast, which will happen in the next podcast, we'll talk about what it looks like to be an adult when these needs are not met. So I don't want to go too far, and we might end up doing some crossover. But
that's fine.
I think it's worth mentioning here that when this is not happening, we're going to feel as adults that this like constant frustration that people aren't just figuring out what we need and doing that for us.
Yes.
It's so worth it mentioning here.
It is.
I think so many people are like, particularly in marriage, particularly women with men, who are like, why can't he just read my mind to do that thing I really want?
You should just know what I need.
You should just
Who's ever
know
heard
what
that
I need.
before? Maybe even said that before. You should just know.
Right. It's stemming from this need not getting met in your infancy, that other people were not spending their energy paying attention to what you need and making sure you had that.
Right.
Maybe they were doing it on their own timeline.
Yeah.
Maybe they're too busy to show up for you, or maybe they had their own emotional dysregulation and you're upset and they can't meet you in that space. Maybe there's addiction in the way or whatever. And so these needs go unmet, and it begins to create a pattern.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but it's like that is where attachment is built in that space. And like the goal, guys, and not the goal, the goal is to have secure attachment.
Right.
And when needs aren't met, when they're needed to be met, or if they're caregivers that met your needs on their timeline, then that causes a insecure attachment style, which we won't dig deep into here.
But we teach all about that in CoLabs.
Yeah. So important. Like this stage and the needs of infants, and again, guys, not only physically but also spiritually, like it's so, and emotionally, all of them, so important here, because this, I think, when the needs aren't met here, it literally will shape how you see the world for the rest of your life,
and how you'll engage in
and
all
how
of
you
your
engage in all,
Absolutely.
until
this shifts,
you understand, and then you have
to
to go back and you do,
and you have a different experience. It takes a different experience in having someone else identify your needs and meet them in order for this space to be healed. And okay, I'm just going to go here. So we talked about this being a need of the community, and I don't know about you, but I don't have anybody who's sitting around just waiting to pay attention to my needs and meet them.
Right.
And unfortunately, in marriage, we put that responsibility on our spouse, even though that's totally inappropriate. That's actually the job of a parent, and not a job of a spouse to just be constantly using their energy to pay attention to what we need and rush to meet it without our verbalization. We are now adults and should have the skill. Reality is, many of us don't have the skill because of this deficiency here. And so where do we find that?
So good.
This is why we're teaching maturity.
Yes.
Because ideally, we would find that in something like a spiritual parent or an elder in our community who can see that we're hurting and show up for us well, or can see that or struggling or hungry or celebrating,
Yes.
like, right?
Yes,
like
yes,
even
yes.
celebrating things. Cause I don't want to just talk about negative stuff, but they're celebrating. I'm celebrating something really big in my life. And what I need is others to celebrate with me.
Yeah.
And somebody else is noticing that and showing up in that space. Like that's another way this can happen.
Yeah. Without me asking.
And that can begin to heal this gap here.
Yeah.
We mentioned this at the end of the last podcast, and I just want to bring it in here for that context is, again, we may not have community to do this for us, or we may not have mature community who can step in this space, but we can actually do this for ourselves.
Yes, we can.
And we can identify what we need, like what those small little parts of us, and this goes into part work, which is a whole other conversation. We really should do a part work podcast.
Yeah.
That'll be forthcoming. But there are like this infant part of you that has these needs that were never met. You actually have the capability of meeting that infant's needs.
Yes.
By identifying that part of you that's aching in that moment where you're feeling like you're not getting what you need and you're feeling really agitated about it, take a moment and see what it is that you realize that you need, and then go do that.
Go do it. Yeah.
We deny.
Oh my goodness, we deny.
Yeah,
ourselves.
We're so often waiting for someone else to show up and do this for us. And yes, that's what community should look like. And we actually have a lot of capability of caring for ourselves really well.
Yes.
And we're not doing it.
No.
Partially because we have these gaps. This is a challenge to do.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that if you have a major gap in this area, like just do it, you know. Ooh, it's hard to identify.
Yes.
It's hard to know what you actually want and need. And that's another piece here, which is also in childhood, of identifying what you need and asking for it as a childhood skill.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that. But all of this, as you can see, builds on itself and it kind of trips one into the other. But my point is, as you listen, yes, community to meet these needs. And could it be you?
Yeah, that's really good.
Particularly in these infant needs when we're adults and we don't accept
because we're all adults now. We're all adults.
Yeah, most everybody who's listening is not 0 to 3.
Exactly.
I don't think our podcast audience is 0 to 3.
No.
There might be, hey, shout out to the kids in the back seat, in the car seats. Hey.
Yes. Yep. But right. Yeah, I know. So, man, that's really good. So in saying that too, it goes right into this next point, is that an infant's fundamental need is to receive unconditional love and care, again, without giving anything in return. Right, or connected to that without having to ask for it.
Yep. And yeah, there can be this in some unhealthy parent-child relationships, particularly when adults haven't had these needs met.
Yep.
Then they'll have children and they think somehow their child is responsible for their joy or for their happiness or for their fulfillment in life. And that baby has no capability of doing that. They cannot actually give anything back in return, although they do.
Yes, they do.
Anybody who has been around a child 0 to 3, there is so much joy to be had because they are a reflector of joy, and they don't have all of our adult things in the way that they are self-conscious of themselves, and they have identity issues and all that. They just show up in the space like Tennison was. You didn't say that this podcast, but where they just like walk into a room and they think they're the best thing since sliced bread, like they're like, I'm here. And they bring that sense of like, I'm here to the room, and it causes everybody to smile. And go ahead.
No, I would say, because what's happened is they've learned that they're valued for just being them without having to earn it. They know that I'm valued and I bring smiles and I bring happiness and joy to the room when I show up.
Just for existing.
And so when those needs are met, and that when that unconditional love is given, that care is given without doing anything for it, and that they just, again, learning to receive. Now they learn to receive that now, which is interesting. Now they're able to give it. Because when they walk into a room, even when they say that, hey, I'm here, happy, and they don't necessarily say that, but you can tell when they walk in, there's like this excitement and this fire that goes on. I mean, they're actually giving joy. Now they're able to give it away, and you cannot receive it. And so it's kind of neat, because if a child doesn't get that, infant doesn't get that, then it's not reciprocal, then they're not able to give it. So in other words, you have to be able to receive, know how to receive, so you know how to give.
Yeah. And we see this show up again in our adult lives when we're struggling to be generous givers. It's often because we really haven't been able to experience what it is to truly receive.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear a lot of messages taught on this, that it's more whatever. It's
blessed to give
more
than
blessed
receive.
to
Yeah.
give than receive. And it's like, yeah, it is. But when you're empty because you've not been on the receiving end of anything, and this part of you has been shut off, that even when people in your adult life are trying to give to you and you don't know how to receive.
Yeah. What do you have to give?
What do you have to give?
Yeah. You got to give it from something you've received.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Another need in that space is that they need people to be happy with them, and to help them return to joy from every overwhelming emotion. Mm-hmm. So they need someone that can help them to recover, or as we would say, return to joy. And we'll dig into that a little bit in some other podcasts in different spaces. But it just looks like helping them regulate their distress and their emotions. What that does too, it brings in a joy bond that is now felt between the caregiver and the child. And now they're able to live from a place of joy and love, not a place of fear. And because if you are in distress and you don't have anyone to regulate with you or to attune to you in that space, then it begins to shape how you again see the world. Everything is bad. Now there becomes this fear base of operation as opposed to this joy base of operation. And so
right, and that gladness to be with you no matter what
comes into play
here, because many of us struggle with believing that people really are glad to be with us no matter what. We tend to walk into scenarios and we operate on this belief that people are glad to be with me until I get upset and I get angry. And the moment I get angry, everybody leaves. Or the moment that I get sad, everybody leaves. Or the moment that I'm anxious, everyone leaves.
Yeah.
Because that's been my life experience. Nobody sat with me when I'm really angry. And, anger, we like to make, and obviously, like, if you're hurting people physically in your anger, or you're hurting people verbally in your anger, like, those people have every right to leave and protect themselves. I'm not saying that. But we get uncomfortable with these feelings and we abandon one another terribly.
Yes.
Because we've never been taught the skill. Remember, this is a skill of maturity.
Yes.
And we learn it through modeling and through experience. And so if people aren't sitting with us when we're sad or when we're angry or when we're hurting or when we're celebrating,
don't forget that.
Then how do we learn how to do that for others? Like, where do we get that to then pass that on? Where have we received that so then we can give it?
If it's not being modeled, we can't experience it, therefore we can't give it.
Right. And if nobody else has sat with us in these, how do we sit with ourselves? Right. And so we spend a lot of our energy when these big feelings come up, we shut them down. We try to numb them. We try to medicate them with all kinds of things, from medication to
actual medication.
Yeah, actual medication to addictions. Because we also don't know how to show up for our own selves in these spaces, nevertheless someone else. And then someone else is grieving a loss and we're just like, it's going to be fine. It's just a matter of time. Oh, you just need to be alone. Okay. And no one's winning in this space.
Yeah, what I'm going to go here. It's not on here either. But what happens a lot of those times in those situations too, sometimes what I've found are people who don't know how to regulate their own emotions or to actually navigate that space or be with people in that. A lot of Christians, I found out, will over spiritualize whatever's happening in their life. And it becomes, well, God's just going to cover it. God's going to take care of it. Jesus is going to fix it. He's going to heal it. He's going to do it.
God's in control.
God's in control.
Yeah.
All of those statements that people say, when honestly part of it has to do with you can't regulate your own emotions to stay present for someone else's emotions. And that stems from this space right here. Now, saying all of that, yes, God can heal it. God does heal it. Jesus will show up. All those things can and do happen.
Right.
But we, unfortunately, sometimes tend to, that becomes the only thing that we are looking forward to.
Yeah, and it's almost like a muzzle for our emotions or for other people's emotions where I don't want to hear it and I can't hear my own self. Otherwise, I'm going to fold.
Yes.
I don't know how to be with myself. And so I'm just going to numb to be able to get through this. And part of what we teach is emotions are actually really, really healthy, and they're there to tell us something, and they're there to help us. They're guides on our journey. And how do we partner with those guides to walk out this journey of being a human without them necessarily getting in the driver's seat and driving us off of a cliff, right? Like, because that's what we're afraid of. We're afraid that if I acknowledge anger's existence, or I acknowledge sadness's existence or grief's existence, then it's going to get in the driver's seat and it's going to drive me off the cliff. Because it has in my childhood, it has in my infancy. Nobody has helped me stay in my own driver's seat and allow grief to be a passenger.
Right. Yeah. So true.
And so we need community to do that. And even now as adults to relearn this, we need community to do that. And back to the idea of I can actually help myself do that in these times too.
Yeah.
With some guidance.
Yeah. And and the last need that I want to say on here is that we need to learn how to rest and quiet with others. So we need to learn how to do that. So again, when we have those big emotions and those things happen as infants, the infants need to learn how to also rest and quiet. And what's not said here, but what happens there is you're actually returning to joy because you're resting and you're quieting, and that happens most of the time with mom or with dad. In those moments where like it's going to be okay and we're just going to rest here together. And that brings another incredible ability to the beginning of learning how to need to self-soothe and to know that I can regulate my emotions. I can be, I can have heavy things happen to me. I know that someone's glad to be with me in this. And then I also know that I can rest in the middle of some of these things too.
And I'm safe to be with myself.
Yes.
Being quiet doesn't mean I get avalanched by all these unprocessed things.
Yeah.
And obviously as a baby, that's not, no baby's like, oh no, I'm going to get avalanched with all my life experiences, or a toddler
but
or whatever.
What you'll see.
But it's what you'll see as you get older. And it is living in this rhythm of joy and rest, joy and quiet. And this is actually taught in infancy. Again, this is an infant skill where you engage with a baby and there's these giggles and oohs and ahs and play and silly. And then we take a break.
Yes.
Because if we have too much joy, then it becomes actually painful.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been tickle tortured knows this.
Yes.
And so that ability to also then let that, just like every other emotion, let joy ride the wave. We receive it. We care for it. We let it run through our body, and then we rest. And then we come back again. And we should be living in this every single day, this rhythm of joy and rest and joy and rest. And we can see it in a baby so easily. And without it, again, back to the caregiver situation, if our caregivers weren't living in joy and rest and constantly going or constantly anxious or constantly chaos in the home, our body's ability to rest will not be formed. And it's something that we need our community to teach us how to do and carry us in that space as infants for it to be natural for us as adults. And without it, we see how it can show up.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we close the podcast, this particular podcast, I want to go over just real quick the infant stage tasks. And so we talked about the needs of our community. These are our tasks to do our part.
Yes.
Our work, however you want to say it. So as an infant, we need to learn how to receive. We need to learn how to synchronize and attune with others. And we do that by looking at the faces of our caregivers. We know, even as infants, our brains are able to tell and our bodies are able to sense when a parent is upset or when a parent is happy or when a parent is sad. And we actually begin to synchronize with that as our emotions develop without any language. we need to learn how to organize ourselves into a person through imitation. And you see this too in the 0 to 3 range where you can, it's so fun. Our granddaughter is super facially expressive. Her mom has given her this gift and it is so fun to engage with. And I actually got to teach her the face of surprise. It just is fun. And I can't remember how old she was. She was
probably
barely over a year. And we have this like surprised face, and it's just so fun to see. And she's learning that through imitation, and language imitation. You say a word and then they repeat a word, and then the next thing you know, now it becomes part of who they are. Another infant stage task is learning how to regulate emotions and calm yourself. And again, we do that as our caregivers are modeling that for us and helping us learn that. We learn how to return to joy from every emotion, that I can get back to this space of knowing that someone is glad to be with me no matter what, that I am not alone, essentially, that I'm not alone. Even when anger arises, sadness comes, I will not be alone here. And so we learn that in infancy. We learn how to be the same person over time. That I return to actually who I am, even as I'm dysregulated, that who I am stays the same, and that I'm not one person this moment and I'm loved and enjoyed.
Right. And
I'm completely different over here and I'm not loved and enjoyed. Or if I'm completely different over here, then I have to do this to get that love back.
And that goes back to that idea of I don't have to like do something to get something.
Right.
I can stay the same person over time, and I'm still loved the same over that amount of time.
Right.
So I can truly be myself in every situation.
Right. And honestly, 0 to 3, there's a lot of behavioral issues. Anybody who has a 3 and under, like there's a lot of behavior.
Yes. Yeah. There
that
you go.
Isn't
a lot of behavior.
Attractive, right? Yes. Like that isn't like, ooh, let me cuddle up to that toddler who's, swinging right now, or who's refusing to listen to me and do what I asked, and we were supposed to go to the store and you're not doing any of that. But when we have caregivers who will stay with us and as if there's nothing that's changed, it allows us to actually find ourselves again and know that when I'm upset, I'm not actually a different person. I'm still me.
Yes.
And people love me even in all those spaces, and that I don't have to, like, being alone does not become the answer there.
Equal that, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Learning self-care skills, and this will definitely ramp up in that childhood maturity, but you're beginning to learn in really, really basic ways. Like you're teaching toddlers at this stage that in the beginning they can't ask for water or something to drink. But by the time they're 3, they should be able to say
drink at least.
They should have a lot of language of, can I please have something to drink? And we even talk about this in raising our kids, where they would say, I'm thirsty. And I would say, that's nice.
That's a little older than 3, but yes.
No, 3, they can say I'm thirsty.
That's true.
Our granddaughter can say I'm thirsty.
She can.
But teaching,
so
I know,
right.
it's so wild. And she's just over 2.5, I guess. And
right now,
but it's teaching that skill, and as caregivers, we should be inviting them along, but learning the skill of not just voicing like, I'm thirsty out to the world, because we see this in adults who are like, I'm thirsty, and we think somebody's supposed to answer that, like respond to this idea of me being thirsty. It's like, okay, what we're learning how to do is say, I'm thirsty, could you please get me something to drink? Like I can't actually help myself to that drink that I need, but I'm acknowledging that I have a need here, and I need your help meeting it.
And that too, we jumped a little ahead, but that is what you'll see when you start to make that transition from infant to child. Is like, I know what I need, I can express it, and then I can also ask for it.
And this is where that begins. And as we talked about in the introduction, all these maturity stages have I cannot think of the word.
Trajectory.
Like an arc. There we go. Thank you. An arc of babies can't do anything, articulate anything, ask for anything. By the time you're 3, you're beginning to learn and enter into that child stage. So that's what it looks like to move through. The last infant stage task is to learn how to rest. If you see yourself struggling in the ability to rest, this is where it came from. You likely were not taught this skill, and or you struggled for some reason really learning how to to receive rest in your body as an infant or as a toddler, and it's continuing with you.
And I think the interesting part of that too is that it's not just learning how to rest, but learning how to rest by yourself and learning how to rest with others. Those are two different skills that need to be, there's those nuances there that need to be learned really as well in that, which I think is also interesting because all of those things that Ginelle just read off are modeled at that age.
Yep.
They're completely modeled by the caregivers. Again, so these are tasks. This is interesting how these are connected too, because if you were to overlay these tasks with these needs that we just read, they're modeled at this stage. They're 100% modeled. So they need you to, so we need as infants to do these things, but we need the tasks, our tasks. Well, we need community to do these things for us. And our task is to actually learn. That's why it says learn how to do these things, because they're being modeled by our
That's so good.
community.
And it is learning. It's receiving. Like
Learning
really,
how to receive,
like
yes.
You can't talk to an infant and be like, okay, now you're resting and you need to do this. This is your task.
No, you just do it together.
You just do it together. But as adults trying to recover those infant gaps,
that's work.
Now we do know.
Yep.
And now we do need to choose and learn in a different way.
And
it's so much easier, though, if we do have caregivers who are modeling it, or a community that's modeling rest and inviting us into that, or a community that's inviting us into self-care and into all these things that they can be relearned as well. So it's super interesting.
And so in our next podcast, guys, that's what we're going to tackle. We're going to look at what you'll see, what are the maturity gaps, what are the holes you'll see in adults that have not fully matured in the infant stage. We're going to talk about a little bit of what are some practical things that you can do for yourself to begin to grow in these maturity stages. And then what are some things that you can do to help your community grow as well? Because as we said before, you are you are community for someone else.
Right.
And so not only are these for yourself, but these are for your community. You've been listening to the Table and Well podcast. New episodes stream every Tuesday. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review to let us know. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to stay up to date on all things Table and Well. To learn more, start your journey, or get information on how Table and Well can help develop your community, family, or teams to be relationally healthy and authentically connected, please go to tableandwell.org/collab to schedule an interest call, or you can email us directly at known@tableandwell.org.